My reflection is on activist burnout, which has three main characteristics, according to Dr. Christina Moslick, a prominent social psychologist. And the three she names are emotional exhaustion, a loss of feeling of accomplishment, and a loss of sense of self. This can happen to any earnest activist, and for good reason. For every 2 steps forward, we're often pushed 1 to 3 steps back. The forces arrayed against us are formidable, and they typically have plenty of money. We, on the other hand, scramble for funding and find ourselves fitting too neatly into the David and Goliath story. Another factor is that we are always dealing with people. And I'm thinking of our fellow volunteers, our compatriots in the great causes. Sometimes these good folks can be downright annoying to us as we are to them. Also, organizing for systemic change is just very hard work. We need to study, recruit, train, collaborate, lead, follow, problem solve, confront, affirm, and put our last touches on that talk sometime after 10 o'clock on the night before. I've been an activist for well over a half century, and I'm still here. So a number of practices have worked for me in preventing and mitigating burnout. I'll share a few of them briefly. First, I find that the greatest gift in the midst of all the activity is friendship with my coworkers. Now, of course, we get on each other's nerves at times, but because we seek justice, peace, respect, and love, we have a lot in common. And the depth of the commitment we share is truly precious. And so collaboration and trust really do come easily, as does brotherly and sisterly care about one another. So be aware of this, cultivate it, and let friendship with your coworkers be a source of joy and renewal. Second, celebrate small victories. These are the stepping stones of progress. When we get a good turnout for a meeting, or we have a breakthrough on a tough issue, let's name it and spread the credit around and take some deep and relaxed breaths. Woo, that went well. Third, there are things we as individuals love to do. Long walks, writing poetry, making or listening to music, coffee with a good friend with whom we can be vulnerable or downright goofy. Write these kinds of things into your daily do list. Put them right up there toward the top. Fourth, let go of negativity, especially toward yourself. We can be awfully hard on ourselves as we inevitably screw up in one way or another. The work we do is complicated. We all have feet of clay. We all have a lot to learn. Mm-hmm. So let's chalk up our failures to an educational experience and move on. Self-forgiveness goes hand in hand with forgiveness and kindness toward others. Give an affirming, forgiving smile to yourself in the morning mirror and commit to passing that spirit on to others as the day progresses. Fifth and last, the word faith is in ICUJP's name, and I'm a person of faith. I find that by attending worship services, my perspective enlarges and my agenda and my worries find their proper place within that larger perspective. My parting word is simply this: self-care is not self-indulgence. It's a revolutionary act because it keeps us in the fray.
Thank you, Dick.
Excellent.
I can use that.
Good.
Hey, Steve, the list of our agenda didn't say anything about announcements before going into our speaker. Is that an oversight or intentional?
We always leave space right now for ICUJP announcements. I will ask Rick to mention next week's program so that we're all aware of that.
Let me
pull it up here. Rose, I think those are people that you might have invited.
Can you just briefly describe?
It's the Center for Restorative Justice, which is a very grand name for a group of people whose main job is getting buses and taking children to visit their parents in prisons around California. And we have had them before, but they've had a few changes post-COVID. So it's kind of worth bringing them back to see what they're doing that is different. They're a very inspiring, very enthusiastic group of young people. They really are quite exciting.
I lifted up Vita Beach, but I was remiss. I meant to dedicate this entire meeting to Lydia Lopez. Lydia passed a few days ago. We got word from Grace Dernis. It was a blessing, according to Grace, because the last period had been a struggle for Lydia. Lydia, I believe, chronologically was a founder of ICUJP. She certainly was a stalwart for decades of our work, an amazing spirit, lively, but serious when she needed to be. And the board of directors of ICUJP is meeting for its regular meeting immediately after this meeting, and we will definitely explore ways to celebrate the life of Lydia Lopez. So those, from my standpoint, are my announcements. Phil, Donna also joined us, if you want to pick up another introduction.
Yeah, I noticed that. Donna, you want to introduce yourself?
Just happy to be here. Thank you all.
Okay. Anyway, so I guess, Steve, you want to introduce Elizabeth for our main show here?
I'm very proud to do so. Elizabeth Gonzalez is a supervising staff attorney with Public Counsel's Consumer Rights and Economic Justice Project. She's assisted consumers who are low income in all areas of consumer law for over a decade, including student loans, debt collection defense, home equity scams, and bankruptcy. She serves on the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation's Debt Collection Advisory Committee. She's presented to national audiences on student loans and bankruptcy and has testified in front of the United States Senate Judiciary Committee on bankruptcy reforms to assist student loan borrowers. Elizabeth is a lecturer in law at the University of Southern California Gould School of Law. We're just delighted to have her and to give us an update on her work and the struggle to protect the rights of consumers and to advance the cause of economic justice. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Steve, for such a nice introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, so when I share my screen, I can only see 4 of you. So if you have questions, feel free to ask me in the middle, but just go ahead and speak up. It's hard for me to monitor the chat and hands up. So if you could just, say, hey, stop, I've got a question. That would be really helpful. So I am here to I want to talk very briefly about all of what Public Counsel does, because I'm not sure how many of you are our organization, what we do. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about my project, which is the Consumer Rights and Economic Justice Project. And I'm going to really focus in on 3 areas where I think we can work together with your organizations to really do some outreach and get some more people some help. So first things first, Public Counsel is a nonprofit legal services organization. It was started in 1970. And what we do, generally speaking, we do a lot of direct services. So what that means is we're one-on-one helping individuals with legal issues. We have 8 different legal practice areas. I've listed them up here. I know it's a little bit small, but I'm just going to go over them just very briefly. So we have our Center for Veterans Advancement that helps military veterans in a number of ways. So anything from overcoming trauma, escape homelessness, provide for their families, including by seeking discharge upgrades and just getting veterans benefits for those who were not able to get them on their own or didn't realize that they had the right to obtain such benefits. We're talking since the center was added to Public Counsel's areas, hundreds of thousands of dollars returned to veterans. A lot of that was through discharge upgrades because people back in the day were wrongfully discharged as dishonorable for things like leaving the military without leave as a result of sexual trauma or sexual assault. People were discharged dishonorably for having been outed as LGBTQ plus, things like that. And so the program has really helped to get those benefits back so veterans can get back on their feet. We also have our Children's Rights Project. So this does a couple of different things. A lot of work with the foster youth, especially transitioning out of the foster system to make sure that they have a proper setup, some safe space to land once they are out of the foster system. A lot of work also with education rights and a lot of work with helping with adoptions. Our community development project works with small businesses and nonprofits, either to set them up or to work with them to break through some of their bureaucratic red tape to either set up or change their status, and really working to lift up people of color who are looking to start small businesses. You may have heard recently we've been in the news for working with the county and the state on making it much easier for street vendors to obtain licenses. That process historically has been very difficult. And even though the state did pass a law trying to make it easier, the County of Los Angeles has been, shall we say, a little slow to implement the ease to provide such permits. And so our community development project has worked to really basically stop the criminalization of street vending, in a sense. I'm going to skip over consumer law because that's what I'm here for. We also have our homelessness prevention project. So this is sort of a twofold project. So our homelessness prevention project does your standard legal services eviction defense. If someone has been either wrongfully evicted or evicted in a way that they need some more time to get out of the apartment, our project helps with that. We are part of the Stay Housed LA program, so all referrals come through Stay Housed LA. So if you have any members or know of any individual who is facing homelessness as a result of an eviction, they should go through Stay Housed LA first. We also, through the project, help with remedying basically such bad violations that homes and apartments have become uninhabitable. We also work with local and state governments to reduce homelessness by pushing litigation and policy so that people have a place to stay and people have a right to stay where they are if there is not available housing. We also have our Immigrants' Rights Project. So this project is focused on a number of different things. Unaccompanied minors, so individuals who are coming through without their parents. We help them get set up with a sponsor or a family member and to obtain special juvenile status so that they can remain in the country. We also work with victims of torture and human trafficking, and help with both defensive and affirmative asylum cases in that sense. We also have our Opportunity Under Law project, which is it's a lot more of the sort of the impact litigation. So you may have heard recently the Bruce's Beach return to the family, and the family then sold it back to the county just a couple of weeks ago. So our Opportunity Under Law and Public Counsel worked on that. We helped find pro bono attorneys to actually look through almost 100 years of land grants and deeds and laws to find a way to get the state to be able to return that land to the family, to the Bruce family. We're also involved in national litigation. You may have heard about the Black farmers who, as part of the COVID relief package, the administration was trying to uplift Black farmers by providing them some more funds, specifically targeting them because Black farmers have historically not been able to access government funds. A lawsuit was filed against the administration saying that was discrimination. And so we are working on that case to show that it's not discrimination. The administration does have the ability, and really working with the Black farmers themselves. So it's a great project, and that's sort of where we do a lot of our impact work. And then finally, we have our Women and Girls project, which helps women and girls through various legal means. We have a weekly workplace rights clinic where workers can call in to check in about, is my employer doing something that they're not allowed to do? We also work on a lot of Title IX information, and making sure that discrimination in schools and the workplace does not stand. So that's sort of the big overview of Public Counsel's legal practice areas. Like I said, we're a legal services organization. We're a little different than I think some of the legal aids that some of you might be aware of, mainly because we are not funded through the Legal Services Corporation grants by the federal government. So what that means is, unlike your Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, we can and do assist undocumented individuals. Our income limits are a bit higher. So, for example, Legal Aid Foundation for a household of one, you have to make less than, I think it's about $1,700 a month, which is very low. At Public Counsel, a family of one can receive assistance if their monthly income is in the $3,500 to $3,800 range. So we're able to help a lot more individuals because we're not accepting that Legal Services Corporation funding. So that's just the general overview. I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit more into our Consumer Rights and Economic Justice project. We call ourselves CREJ for short. So I'm probably going to say CREJ, so that's what I mean, Consumer Rights and Economic Justice Project. So we do a lot. Consumer projects and legal services tend to be the depository of when something doesn't quite fit into your eviction defense or your immigration rights. They just kind of say, oh, it must be consumer. So that's why we were able to do a lot of different things. Our main areas of focus are here on the screen. I'm going to focus on the following slides on our bankruptcy work, our foreclosure work, and keeping people in their homes. Some of the things that you might not realize we can do, I think that one of the biggest ones that is surprising is we fight against the criminalization of poverty. And the way that we do that is by working with individual clients to change policies and procedures around things like traffic tickets, towing, criminal fines and fees being used to take someone's driver's license away, for example. And we do a lot of work against the bail industry. For those who are not aware, the bail industry in California has gotten quite large and is using their reach to really take advantage of individuals by convincing, usually at 3 or 4 in the morning, people to sign these bond finance agreements, saying, hey, you don't have to pay the $5,000 bond up front, we can finance it for you. And of course, the contract that is provided is not in the language that the person understands. The interest rate turns out to be very high. Disclosures aren't properly given. And we see a lot of people who are in danger of losing their homes because they unknowingly provide a security interest for that bond. And so we have been on the forefront in working with the AG's office and filing lawsuits against bail bonds. You may have heard of the Bad Boys bail bonds case, which we recently received a very nice decision about. It's still going on, but the idea is, bail bonds companies should not be profiting off of the backs of low-income people of color. We also do a lot of work on fraud and unfair business practices. Unfortunately, again, low-income people of color are often targeted by organizations and companies saying that they're helping. We've got Curacao, who's like, oh, you can't afford to furnish your house. We can, help you with that. No credit needed. And it turns out that they are, Curacao and places like that really just sort of get people to sign unfair contracts, make promises that they're not keeping, warranties aren't there. Even though they're told you can bring back anything that you would like and no charge. When they try to do that, they're charged, these restocking fees and penalties, and so they end up paying far more for furniture than they needed to. So that's sort of the big picture view of the CREDGE project. I'm going to stop here to see if anyone has any questions so far.
Are you opening up for Q&A here, Elizabeth?
I still have slides to go. I just wanted to see if anyone has questions before I move on.
Okay.
Yes, I have one. Could you give us, you said something about Stay House LA. Can you tell us what that website is? Yeah,
it's stayhousela.org. And so basically anyone who is at risk of losing their housing, is behind on their rent and is being threatened with eviction can go to that website and apply. And it's sort of a repository, and the Stay House LA then feeds out that application to certain organizations, and then that organization reaches out to the individual for assistance.
Thank you.
Steve?
This may not fit in precisely here or elsewhere, but there was an expected tsunami of evictions due to COVID, et cetera. Where do we stand on that? A lot of efforts were going into building defense bar of lawyers and paralegals who could help. And either now or when it works for you, could you update us on that?
Yeah, I will say that we have been preparing for the tsunami, and we have not yet seen it. I think a lot of it in LA County has to do with, sort of continued extensions of the protections. I think some of it has to do with the way the state of California has sort of separated the eviction from the collection of the back rent. So the big thing that happened that would affect the work that I do and our Consumer Rights Project does is the state of California said, look, if you're going to file an eviction, an unlawful detainer because of unpaid back rent, you first have to take advantage of the assistance, the rental assistance that has been provided by the state, because both renters and landlords were able to apply to get that rental assistance. So the first big thing is you can't file the unlawful detainer to evict someone because of unpaid rent if you had not taken advantage of that system. And so that we think that that pushed a lot of landlords to actually do the application themselves to recover some of that back rent. Number two, while in previous times, an eviction, unlawful detainer case could be used not just to evict someone, but to also collect the back rent, those two things have now been separated. So the unlawful detainer can only be filed to regain possession of the housing. If the landlord wants to collect on the back rent, they have to file a separate small claims or limited civil, or if it's over 25,000, they could do an unlimited civil case just to collect that money. And that is considered under these new rules consumer debt. And so the collection of it is different than the eviction now. And so we have not been seeing those efforts to collect the back rent yet. We do think it's coming. We do have a plan for it. We have been involved in training attorneys, but it hasn't happened yet. And we keep saying, okay, now that the moratorium is expiring, or now that, the money has dried up from the rental assistance, now it's going to come, but we just haven't seen it yet. And sometimes it's hard for us to tell if it hasn't happened or we're just not seeing people. I just think it hasn't happened because normally something like this, we would be seeing at least one or two cases. Hopefully that answers that. Great. Okay, so I am now going to get a little bit more specific into a few areas. So one of the things that we do to really try to help low-income debtors is assist people with counsel and advice and information about bankruptcy. Especially in times like this, where people had to incur a massive amount of credit card debt because they had been laid off, there was no emergency fund, and they're really trying to get out from under that, what we're really calling COVID debt, because a lot of this, was incurred after 2020. People come to us because, they hear from their friends, brothers, sisters, mothers, cats, dogs, cousin, that they should file for bankruptcy. And so one of the things that we do is really try to get to the bottom of why someone feels that they need to file bankruptcy, and explain that the state of California is actually very, very generous in protections, so that people might not have to file for bankruptcy. And so to that end, we have a twice weekly clinic, Mondays and Wednesdays, where we provide counsel and advice for pre-filers, meaning people who are considering bankruptcy and need more information, people who are ready to file and need their paperwork reviewed so that they don't have to hire an attorney to make sure that paperwork is correct, and people who have already filed without an attorney and need help on the next steps of the bankruptcy process. And mostly we do this for Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is usually what a lower income consumer is filing. We provide some information on a Chapter 13. I'm not going to get too much into the difference, but a Chapter 13 is for someone who has some more income and is able to pay back some of their creditors. And we also provide information to creditors. Unfortunately, there are a lot of companies who have filed for bankruptcy. And so we have either, former employees or former clients, especially in the housing contractor world, coming to us saying, hey, my contractor or my employer filed for bankruptcy, but they owe me money or they owe me work. What do I do? And so we provide counsel and advice to those individuals as to what they can do within the bankruptcy process to try to get some of their money back. And then a lot of times people come to a bankruptcy clinic because they've received, a summons and complaint and they're being sued for a credit card debt. And so in those cases, when we think that bankruptcy isn't necessarily the best option for them, we can refer them to either our own organization to help with that response to the complaint, or if someone is seeing a wage garnishment or a bank levy, we'll sometimes either help them right then and there with the paperwork to get that money back, or refer out to our organization or someone else. And sometimes just people find a clinic and then they come, and what they actually need help with is something that public counsel cannot assist with. And so we do provide referrals to outside organizations for such things. So The clinic is held Mondays and Wednesdays, basically from 9:30 to 4 with a break for lunch. And people can sign up online. I've put the website there, or they can call and leave a message. And currently the bankruptcy clinic is remote. So we are helping people through Zoom. And for people who don't have access to the internet or computer, they can call into the Zoom meeting using their phone. So that's sort of, and we help close to 1,000 people a year through this bankruptcy clinic alone. The other thing we do as part of our bankruptcy program, if someone does come into our clinic and we realize, this is actually a pretty good candidate for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, we are able to work with pro bono attorneys from the bankruptcy community to take on those cases for free. And so they get an attorney to represent them in a bankruptcy. The attorney prepares the paperwork and appears for them. And it's a great relief when someone, comes in drowning with $50,000 of debt, and 4 months later, with the help of a pretty good bankruptcy attorney, they walk away not having to pay any of that back. It's a great program. It's a great process, and it provides a lot of comfort and relief to our low-income debtors. The next sort of tranche of things that we help with is debt collection defense. This is probably the largest need that we are seeing right now after bankruptcy. And it's very, very broad. So when we say debt collection defense, we mean defending against installment loans, collections, credit card collections, student loan collections, basically any lawsuit that is seeking to collect money from a consumer based on a consumer contract. And we were just very lucky to receive a pretty significant grant from the State Bar of California to really focus our efforts on this. We have been seeing so many people needing assistance with responding to a complaint or needing help stopping a wage garnishment that we just don't have enough people in-house to do it. And so this grant is going to allow us to not only hire some more attorneys, but also focus a lot of the help that we do on clinics where people can come in and after an hour walk out with a response to a complaint or a completed form to stop the wage garnishment. And so the help that we provide is varied. Sometimes people they understand that they don't have to pay back the debt. They understand that their Social Security is protected from collection, but they're getting phone calls and they're getting letters and they're sick and tired of it. And so we'll help with that type of harassment by working on letters to send out to creditors, basically saying, look, this person is collection proof. They don't have anything you can take. Stop contacting them. And under the law, they have to do that. Sometimes people need help with that lawsuit itself. A lawsuit is filed against them by either Citibank or a debt buyer to collect on a $1,200 credit card debt from 3 years ago. And we help with responding to those complaints. We help with responding to discovery, which is basically a form of question and answers that is allowed to be used in litigation. We help people prepare for trial. And especially now with this grant, we're actually going to be able to sign on for full representation. So these individuals will get an attorney to help them for free. This is really important because unfortunately, debt collectors and even original creditors sort of use the courts as an arm of their debt collection activities. The debt collectors in this state get, it's sort of perverse. They get a discount on filing debt collection complaints, so they don't have to pay the same amount of money as a regular person filing a regular lawsuit. They get 6 times as long to try to find a defendant to serve them before a case is dismissed, and they actually get like twice as long as that. When they say that a person doesn't respond, the I'm putting proof in quotes, the proof that they have to put up to the court to show that no, really they've sued the right person for the right amount on a correct debt is very minimal. Quick statistic, about 90% of debt collection cases end in a default judgment, meaning 90% of these cases, the defendant never responds, and so the creditor wins without having to do anything but pay about $188. When a defendant has an attorney, that default judgment rate drops significantly. It's down to about 5%. And when a defendant in a debt collection case has an attorney representing them, the resolution in favor of the defendant is high percentage. I think it's about 80% of the time the defendant wins or gets a favorable settlement because they have an attorney representing them. And it's sort of a ridiculous number when you realize that in the last 10 years, there have been close to 1 million debt collection lawsuits filed in California. So if you think about 90% of that million going to default judgment, that's 90% of 1 million is a lot, 900,000 if my math is correct. And that means that that judgment is then used to garnish someone's wages, to levy someone's bank account, to put a security interest in someone's home. And so this is a huge problem. There aren't enough attorneys. And so this is why we're really focusing a lot of our work on this. The other thing that happens is we see people coming in who got a judgment against them and they either never knew about the case or just had no idea what to do to respond. And so we also work to get those default judgments taken away so that the defendant has the right to actually defend themselves. And we also, once the judgment is entered and someone does have a wage garnishment or a bank levy, we do work to help protect their income by showing that they need these funds for their everyday use. And so we have already been able to have some success. I can tell you that we did a little bit of a pilot program in the last year where we signed on to represent, I think it was 6 cases. In all 6 cases, the case ended up being dismissed with the client not having to pay a dime. Had we not signed on to those cases, there probably would have been a judgment against these individuals. And so this is probably where a lot of those of you who are part of a specific faith-based organization or community organization, your members probably need this a lot. And so what we are working on is creating twice monthly clinics, virtual at first and in person if anyone thinks that that's a better way of doing it, to actually sit down and within an hour or two have someone draft an answer or response to a complaint for someone, respond to discovery requests, respond to motions, so that after that clinic, they walk away, they file the paperwork with the court, and they have some more breathing room before a judgment is entered. These clinics are going to be held Fridays with some more information to come. Our first sort of pilot program is, pilot clinic is set for February 3rd. So if you have individuals who need assistance with a wage garnishment, a bank levy, a debt collection case, you're welcome to refer them to our phone number extension 700 for that. And I'll get into that contact information in a bit. So we think that we're probably going to be helping 500 to 600 people over the course of the grant, just on debt collection defense. I actually think it's going to be more than that. But yeah, and so Steve, just going back to the point about the evictions and the back rent collection, this is where we would be helping that sort of tsunami of people helping to respond to the complaints. And, you know, if there is a judgment, either working to see if that judgment was obtained rightfully or protecting assets of people. Go ahead, Steve.
Just a quick insert. There was talk of the county providing counsel in certain rent cases or other cases to supplement the amazing work that you guys are doing. What's become of that?
So what that actually means in practice is legal service organizations, the county is sort of encouraging pro bono work, basically. So it's working with legal service organizations to expand their volunteer attorney groups to help people find representation. That's really what that is. It's not like they gave us, $3 million to hire 10 more staff.
So they didn't find the money even for individual lawyers who want to include this in their law practice?
No. So basically, from my understanding, that's what Stay Housed LA is. So basically, the money was put up to create Stay Housed LA, to create this coalition, so that people who need help get funneled through Stay Housed LA. Organizations that are able to assist open up their intake through there. They get referrals. But I mean, if someone goes into Stay Housed LA right now and says, I need an attorney, they're not going to get one because there's so many, unfortunately. So that's sort of the long and short of it. Was there another question? Okay. So the next thing that I want to focus on is foreclosure prevention and home preservation. So we do hear a lot about, renters who are being displaced, and that is a huge issue, and our homelessness prevention project does help with that. In the Consumer Rights Project, what we're focusing on is keeping homeowners in their home. This is becoming an issue again. Just like in 2008, we have usually elderly homeowners, people who've been in their homes for 40, 50 years, having issues, either because there was a second mortgage taken out or a home refinance done or something like that, and they can't afford it, or they're still paying on a 30-year mortgage. And so once the pandemic hit, there were a lot of people who lost income and they fell behind. So we are working with partners to conduct clinics and Know Your Rights presentations to help people stay in their homes. So some of the services that we provide are figuring out if there are any immediate legal steps that can be taken to stop any sort of foreclosure process. A lot of times these servicers don't really follow the rules in terms of notices that are supposed to be given. And so with a quick letter, sometimes we're able to just stop the foreclosure process. For individuals who just need help either paying the mortgage or coming up with some sort of loan modification, we work to connect homeowners with housing and urban development approved housing counselors who have basically a direct line to the right place at the bank to get this done. A homeowner trying to do this on their own gets stuck with some random customer service person. HUD-approved housing counselors can get to the right person pretty quickly to figure out what's needed for a loan modification. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of is homeowners with reverse mortgages who, for one reason or another, the reverse mortgage has been called in during their lifetime. It's usually because they have stepped away from the home because of health issues, or because they weren't able to pay property taxes or maintain insurance, and the reverse mortgage sort of pays that and then tries to collect. And so one of the things that we do is work with reverse mortgage companies to obtain what are called at-risk extensions that basically push out the collection for a year at a time. It's a pretty simple process, but it's one of those processes that the reverse mortgage company is not going to be very open about the possibility of and the application. And so unfortunately, as simple as it is, you often need someone with legal expertise to actually fill out the form and get that extension for you. The other thing that we do is assist avoiding involuntary judicial liens. So going back to sort of that debt collection side of things, once a judgment is obtained, that judgment can be turned into a lien against a property. And so one of the things that we want to do is stop that lien from being in existence in the first place by defending against the case. To the extent the lien has already been placed, we work with the creditors to either remove or reduce the lien, or work with the homeowner to understand their rights in terms of that. You know, 2 years ago, a credit card company could have gotten a judgment for $10,000, put a lien on the property, and then actually foreclosed on the property for $10,000. That is no longer the case. So the state of California has passed some laws saying that, yes, you can put the lien on, but you can't force the sale of the home. The only way that that lien is going to be paid is if someone sells or refinances the home. So we see this a lot coming up with refinancing, although not recently, but back when interest rates were low, people were trying to refinance and, oh, whoops, there's this judicial lien that has to be paid off. And so we worked with creditors to try to get rid of those liens so that the homeowner can actually take advantage of the equity in their home. So as to that end, we offer twice monthly foreclosure prevention clinics. They're held the second and third Tuesday of each month. Homeowners are provided free counsel and advice, referrals, and assistance with loss mitigation applications, which, if anyone has not done a loan modification application, congratulations. It is probably one of the most frustrating things to have to work on. And so it means a lot to a homeowner to have someone who knows what needs to be done, knows what needs to be gathered, and knows who to talk to get this pushed through. So to sign up, you know, I put a link on here, but I realized you probably can't get the link. However, the clinic's link from the bankruptcy will take you to the same place. So this is really helpful for individuals who are facing some sort of issue with their home. Okay. The other thing that we are doing, yes, Rick.
Just to let people know, I did put the link in the chat for the clinics. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Something that a lot of people aren't aware of, as a result of pandemic funds through the federal government, the state of California has actual cash money to give out to homeowners who are facing financial hardships and are behind on their mortgage, up to $80,000. Like literally, the state of California will just pay $80,000 towards your back mortgage or your reverse mortgage. Very few people know about this program. It does seem like a scam, but it's not, trust me. And so what we're doing is really working to reach out, get the information out, that this is an actual program that can help, and we can provide assistance with the application to see if you qualify. There are income limits, there are geographic limits, but the majority of clients that could qualify for public counsel assistance would qualify for this program because LA County is considered an at-risk county for people losing their homes because of the pandemic. So we help people currently through the foreclosure prevention clinic on this, but if people can't make the clinic, we can also help them in-house on the application. And again, I mean, if you just think about what $80,000 can do for someone who hasn't been able to pay their mortgage in 2 or 3 or 4 years, it's amazing to be able to get that done. So that's sort of, you know, one of the big things that we're trying to get the word out on because a lot of people just are not aware of the project. So how can you guys help? I think the biggest thing is to work in partnership with us to host either a virtual or an in-person clinic, whether it's a bankruptcy clinic, a debt collection defense clinic, foreclosure prevention, or homeowner assistance clinic. We know that there is a high need for these services in South Los Angeles, East and Southeast Los Angeles, and the Antelope Valley. We are not seeing clients come to us from these areas. So we are really going to be relying on organizations, faith-based organizations, nonprofits in these areas to help us get to these homeowners and these debtors. So if you have a space or if you just have a large population that could be helped through a virtual clinic, please contact me to set something up. Same with Know Your Rights presentations. Sometimes people don't necessarily need immediate assistance, but something might be coming, you know, in a few months. And so they want to know what their rights are about debt collection or foreclosure, what might be out there if they think they're not going to be able to make a payment. And so again, we're not seeing a lot of people in these high risk areas. And so we really need help getting the word out, posting, getting the name of an organization that these individuals trust. So your churches, your temples, your faith, your community-based organizations connected to us so that they know they can contact us and we are not a scam. And if you have individuals who come to you and say, you know, I got this lawsuit, I don't know what it is, do you know anyone who can help me? You can give them public counsel's phone number. They can apply either online or make a phone call to get assistance. So that's really what I'm hoping for. You know, Steve knows, before law school, I worked at the ACLU and I was an organizer for a community-based theater company. And the way that I got so many people involved was through faith-based organizations. That was like my go-to, because you guys are really kind of amazing at organizing. And so this organization itself was also very helpful. So let me see, do we have questions? Yeah, so I am now done with the presentation. Happy to open it up for questions. So to help people who might have a small ticket or a small infraction that could end up becoming, you know, jail. And so we really are focused on that aspect of it, and then also on the bail industry, because a lot of low-income people of color end up in jail because they don't have the money to pay the bail or even the bond. And so, you know, we did work on eliminating cash bail. We are working on, you know, making it very clear to the state of California that allowing bail bonds companies to operate the way they have been operating not only doesn't help keep people out of jail or prison, it also creates additional financial hardships, not just on that individual, but their families who are co-signing or guaranteeing that bond. Our Opportunity Under Law project, you know, they're doing work to help with that, the greater issue of criminalization of, you know, everything to get people into the correctional facilities. So we are doing some of that work. We, you know, in terms of the direct services, that's, you know, CREG is doing that work to try to decriminalize that poverty, to keep people out of that process.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. I did put an article in the chat that talks about how the county's changing the way it's funding the bar to deal with the crisis, you know. And so I think it's going to impact people because there's a changeover on how they're going to fund dealing with renters needing rights. But I had another concern that no one's really been dealing with, which is the predatory lending that's happened by the city of Los Angeles through the Housing Trust Fund. It's another example of what the banks did. And now we have the government sanctioning the same type of predatory lending. And I did ask, I guess, the two new elected people, I saw them last week, to get an audit. I talked to Hugo Soto and Unicis and explained to them what I had witnessed in the Housing Trust Fund and asked them if they can get Kevin Mejia, the new controller, to do an audit. Because in the future, I think a lot of people are going to lose their homes because the city engaged in predatory lending. And I think that's another, you know, where the state sanctioned it as well. You know, when they put CalPERS, they invested in the predatory, the mortgage-backed derivatives. So I don't know if your nonprofit would be willing to do anything about that. Thank you. Next question.
Thank you for the information. I don't know. What I can do is I'm going to put my email in the chat. I think you guys got it I don't know. I'm just going to put it in the, I don't know. That would probably be something more for the Opportunity Under Law program, but I don't know. I'm going to be honest and say I don't know.
Sometimes, yeah, the information is fantastic, but sometimes the story helps break through people, make people understand the need for what you're doing. So do you have a story you can tell us about some victory, some individual in having some issue and coming to public counsel and fighting and changing the way things are done that you feel really excited about?
Yeah, I've got like 1,000 of them. And also from my, I did this work at another organization in Orange County. So over the course of my years, this was at my old organization, but I think it would be, it's sort of the best example of a start to finish, direct to an impact change. So when I first started at my other position, I got this client who had filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, thought her debts were discharged, but kept getting these letters from Orange County probation saying, you owe money from when your son, juvenile, was incarcerated. And she said, well, but I thought this was discharged. And I looked at it and I looked at, the bankruptcy law and I was like, yeah, this is discharged. I'm not sure what's going on. So I sent them a letter saying, she filed the Chapter 7, this debt was discharged, stop contacting her, otherwise we're going to have to get the court involved. And they responded by saying that her debt owed to the county as a result of the involuntary incarceration of her son was a domestic support obligation and therefore non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. Domestic support obligation meaning child support. Now, I thought about that and I said, well, that's ridiculous. How is that child support? It's not like she took the kid and said, here, take him, please support him for a year. They took her son away from her and now they're saying, basically, we were the parent and so you owe us child support. And I said, that's not right. So we filed a proceeding to basically say that they were violating the law by continuing to collect. We unfortunately lost at the bankruptcy court level. We appealed the ruling to the bankruptcy appellate panel, lost there, and appealed it to the Ninth Circuit. And the Ninth Circuit, and in this wonderful circular life, and an opinion that was authored by Judge Reinhart, who was the spouse of Ramona Ripston, the executive director of the ACLU, where I used to work, wrote an amazing opinion that said, no, the debt incurred as a result of an involuntary incarceration of a minor child is absolutely not domestic support, is absolutely discharged in a bankruptcy. And this is exactly the kind of state-sanctioned criminalization of poverty that needs to stop. Cited the Ferguson report where, cities and local agencies were basically using low-income people of color as a way to fund their municipalities. That was an amazing victory for our client, but then we started doing the legislative work. And a couple of years later, the state of California revised their law saying that they would no longer be collecting from the parent the debts for the quote unquote caretaking of the children while they were in juvenile detention. And that the child themselves, once they became of age, that would not be collected against them. And because what was happening is the juvenile would continue to be on probation until that debt was paid off. And so they were, even though they had served the time, even though everything else was taken care of, they were continuing to be on probation until that debt was paid. And so that is no longer the case. And so that is probably The greatest example of the work that our organizations do, not just for direct services, not just to protect consumers, not just to enforce, the law, but also to change the legal policy, the law, the statute that allowed that collection. So hopefully that helps.
I was hoping that today was focused on because of the dealing with housing or just all debt in general, because another area I think that most people suffer from debt has to do with overbilling with medical. And sometimes you're put all these charges, even to the point where women were being charged for their own rape kits.
Yep. So that is part of our debt collection defense, is defending against medical debt as well. Luckily, we're seeing less of that because of some changes that have occurred. But yes, absolutely. Part of the debt collection defense that we do is defending against either pre-litigation or litigation on the collection of medical debt.
So I'll jump in with my question, but I want to begin. The cruelty of government has no limits, and I just want to quickly tell a story. I was in law school at Columbia Law School and my internship was at the Legal Aid Society. And in New York City, welfare is a debt. If you ever come into any money, you have an obligation to pay back your welfare that you've been receiving lawfully from the city. And in this case, a woman who had immigrated from Germany received her reparations for being in a concentration camp, and the city of New York seized her reparations and claimed that they were entitled to her reparations because she had been on welfare. And I was able to work on that case with the Legal Aid Society and get her a measure of justice. So that is 50 years ago in law school, and hearing these stories of what the ends the government will go to. That turns to my question, Elizabeth. You've mentioned a couple of times the criminalization of poverty, and we have enough time today if you want to expand on the different ways in which different levels of government have escalated debt collection fees for various services and other activities, and then have cranked up the consequences by criminalizing the non-payment of these fees. And how is it being addressed both in litigation and in advocacy and legislation?
I will do my best. So I think one of the greatest examples is the story I just told. This idea that this child, even though he was an adult, could not get off probation for something that happened 5-6 years ago because this debt was allegedly still owed. And so for to continue to be on probation, means something in terms of getting jobs, in terms of, advancing in the wealth gap. And so that's one of the big things. The other thing that we are seeing is, small things like traffic violations can turn into the loss of a driver's license, can turn into the loss of income, loss of a job, and homelessness. And so, the idea that the state is using the court system to collect on these debts with the consequences that would be applied to someone who, had a drunk driving accident, and killed somebody, comparing those two, saying, well, so we can take away your license until you pay the fees. And that, again, leads to the loss of income, the loss of a job, and not being able to get rid of that debt. Something even as quote unquote simple as not being able to pay your car registration fees. When you get a parking ticket, if you can't pay it, eventually you're stopped from registering your vehicle until you pay the parking ticket. So that leads to someone driving a vehicle that's not registered. If they end up getting pulled over, now they're getting a ticket for that. Now the car can be impounded. I mean, it just escalates. And so one of the things that we and other organizations did, I think one of the biggest changes happened, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, where a coalition of organizations filed lawsuits against the county superior court saying, you should not be, you don't have the ability to order someone's license to be revoked because you're not providing the due process. And that was a fight. But finally, the ruling came out that, yeah, that's right. The state superior court, the county superior court should not be in the business of revoking someone's driver's license. That is something that has to happen through the DMV with process, with notice, with a hearing. And so that was probably one of the bigger litigation wins in terms of that. I think the work that we're doing with street vendors is also, a big issue that people don't necessarily connect to the criminalization of poverty. But the permitting fees alone, are ridiculous. And until these changes just went through, I mean, it was almost impossible for a low-income street vendor to be able to afford the process. And so they risked being in violation of the law by continuing their street vending without the proper permits. And so part of the policy change was to reduce the cost and reduce the process, the time it took to obtain that permit. But even so, we're still seeing, police going after street vendors, inspectors, not clearing the way for a proper inspection. People being chased down the street with their cars because they don't have the permits, because they don't have the money to be able to pay the permit to work. And so that, I don't know off the top if this is happening yet, but I can see a world in which there is litigation, some sort of a class action surrounding street vendors who have been fined, who had their livelihoods taken away because of that, to say, that the county, the state, the city can't pursue these individuals if they have not done what is supposed to happen to make the licensing and permitting process easier, right? You can't go after someone based on a law that requires your permit when you haven't followed the rules of the implementation of the new process to get permits. Does that make sense?
I think that's very helpful. Most of those examples are civil fines and forfeitures. Are there, when you speak of criminalization of poverty, are there instances that have led to charges of crimes and leading to incarceration?
So I think maybe so it's what we look at from the consumer world as the criminalization of poverty is, the fact that you're getting a ticket for parking somewhere because you don't have a parking space in your, housing, and you're getting a ticket because you didn't move your car in time for street sweeping. So that is part of what we're saying. So taking that to its next level, right? You get the parking ticket because you don't have the money to pay for a parking space, or where you're living, the only way that they can afford that low rent is to not have parking. The parking ticket then cannot be paid. That individual then cannot register their vehicle. Then they get pulled over and they're driving without a proper registration. So then that vehicle gets impounded and they're now in the legal process to obtain the vehicle back, paying the fees. I don't.
Or you get a boot on your car.
Yeah, they get a boot on the car. There is, and this is sort of something that a few people know about. So the court, the Superior Court, does have a way to issue bench warrants for the arrest of individuals who do not appear for their hearings on the ticket or the registration or even on debt collection cases. So, you know, we're constantly telling people there's no debtor's jail, and there isn't, except if there's a judgment against you and you're told to show up for a debtor's exam and you don't, either because you didn't get proper notice or you can't get the day off, the court can now issue a bench warrant to actually arrest you because you didn't show up to those hearings. So I think that's also a way that there's that criminalization of poverty in terms of someone who can't get out of work to attend a hearing, and now they're being issued a bench warrant. So
yes, good. That's very helpful. And we have to remember that all of that is channeled through the criminal system when you're getting tickets, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I want to step back. I see Donna has her hand.
No rush. I wanted to know if you train paraprofessionals to go out into the community and, you know, notify people at all. I mean, is there any way to get involved if you're not a lawyer?
So we don't train paraprofessionals to do sort of the legal work, and there's a number of reasons for that, mainly having to do with our malpractice insurance. However,
not the legal work, but to let people know about the programs that they could apply for or participate in.
Well, and so that's sort of what the ask is, right? So you can certainly individually tell people about the programs, but if we can work with you or your organization to provide the presentation, because that's part of what we do, is we will come to you and your organization to provide that information, the Know Your Rights, and also clinics. But in terms of, so that's one thing. In terms of getting involved without having the legal background, there are ways to volunteer. So whether it's being a volunteer for Public Counsel's Consumer Rights Project, where you're helping return phone calls, do intakes, presenting cases, or volunteering to work a Know Your Rights presentation or a clinic, either by interpreting or providing transportation, or, you know, just when sometimes these clinics can be really large, and so just sort of expediting people coming in and out. Does that help answer the question?
Thank you.
Thank you. And Sophia, I see another question from you.
No, just an assessment when it comes to keeping people in poverty on a macro level. When you're looking at family court, and some of the people I've tried to help when it comes to dealing with rears and child support, and what it does to so many families, and the misconception of who actually get that money when people fail to appear, and just the discord that has on families when, say, someone hasn't been able to pay their child support and their license is taken away, and they fail to appear, and there all these fines, and then within the family structure they get a bill and they believe that they're paying into this debt that's so high that they can't get out of, and they think that the mother of the child is getting that money when that mother of the child is not receiving those funds. It's caused so much dissension within families, but the fees have been so high that I just see it as so difficult for men to try and get out of poverty. They're trying to do their best. Some are deadbeat dads, but there are others who are trying to live and get out of or just pay off their debt, but it's so high. And so many of them come to me saying, you know, I don't have anybody to represent me, and they can't find anyone.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is absolutely a tough one. You know, what we often do is refer those individuals to the Department of Child Support Services. It can, you're absolutely right. It is a frustrating process, but Child Support Services has, the ability to put someone in, a non-collectible status or to set the payment at zero. But yeah, that doesn't do a whole lot for, what's already owed. They can't really take that away. And that's probably a legislative fix. I will tell you that having been involved in some legislative work recently, that's going to be a very tough road, for the reasons that you can probably guess, right? It's hard to see the impact on poverty and people of color when the pushback is, but the child needs the support. But in terms of the work that Public Counsel does and Consumer Rights does, we do provide, just information and advice on how to at least waive some fees or seek to be put in non-collectible status, or referrals to organizations that can help parents go back into court to modify the child support order, because we don't specifically do family law at Public Counsel.
I thought Carol Francis was really onto something when she asked you to humanize these challenges and battles in any of the areas you've talked about today at Public Counsel. Do you have some stories of how of what a challenge it has been for people to face these legal problems, and then how you were able to intervene, you and your colleagues, to provide some relief? Any other examples of that?
I mean, I would say one of the biggest examples is homeowners who were victims of contractor fraud under the Property Assessed Clean Energy program. For those who are not aware, the Property Assessed Clean Energy program, or PACE, was a program created with good intentions, but that was, of course, taken over by bad actors. Basically, the state of California provided this PACE program where counties could sign up to be part of the PACE program, which would do the following. They would work with administrators to allow financing of supposedly energy efficient upgrades to homes to homeowners who would pay the upgrades through their property taxes, because a lot of homeowners wouldn't necessarily qualify for a refinance loan or just a home equity loan to obtain funds to put, say, solar panels on their property or upgrade their heating system. And the idea is the property tax amount would be paid over, 30, 40 years with an interest rate that wasn't terrible, 7, 8, 9%. And so that would make it an affordable situation for individuals who wanted to, put solar panels on their house. What ended up happening is PACE administrators would work with home improvement contractors to go door to door and say things to homeowners like, this is part of a free government program. Wouldn't you like to help the environment? And sign people up for these upgrades and either not do any work or not do the work properly. So, put some solar panels on, but not connect them, or put some solar panels on, but, not enough to actually power the home. And they would inflate the cost of whatever the work was. Because back in the day, the amount of PACE financing, meaning the amount that they could charge, was based on the home equity. And so when you have a 60, 70, 80-year-old person who has a paid off home and the home is worth $700,000, the contractor could theoretically say the work is worth $150,000, when of course the work was worth $15,000. And so what that ended up meaning is the homeowner had no idea that this was going to be a property tax issue, because they're hearing it's a free government program, you don't have to pay anything, and you get to help the environment. The way property taxes work, these assessments don't get placed for a year. So someone signs up for the work in August, they don't see a property tax bill until the next November. All of a sudden, their property taxes that had been $200 a year, now $10,000 a year. Can't afford it. The PACE program gets what's called a super priority lien. So the property tax lien from the assessment of the PACE work takes precedent over the mortgage, over a second, over anything else. So when someone doesn't pay their property taxes, the county can foreclose on the property. When someone has a mortgage and they don't pay their property taxes, the mortgage company pays the property taxes, and now your mortgage payment has gone up. So your mortgage payment, which had been $900, is now $4,000. And so now you can't afford the mortgage payment, and so now you're in foreclosure because of the mortgage. So that's sort of the telling the story of the issue. The challenge that we as advocates, we at Public Counsel had, is no one was taking responsibility. So we would see work hadn't been done or hadn't been done properly, but the contractor no longer is around. They took their money and ran, because the contractor gets paid by the PACE administrator based on, yes, I did the work. So contractor has already been paid. PACE administrator says, well, it's not our fault. We're not going to take away this lien because you had work done, or you agreed, or you signed a contract. And the money that comes up front to pay the PACE administrator so that they can pay the contract comes from the county selling bonds to investors. And so in order to try to get an agreement to remove the assessment, you've got to get the investors to agree not to get paid their interest. So it was sort of like a four-headed monster, where we were trying to convince courts that the PACE administrator was actually responsible for the contractor's representation, that the county didn't do enough to vet the PACE administrators, and so the county shouldn't be allowed to collect on the property taxes, and that any investors who could object had no standing because the initial process wasn't proper. So much pushback on that, Steve. People were losing their homes left and right. There is a great John Oliver segment on this process that explains it in a probably far more interesting and entertaining way than I just did. But so the challenge is, how do we keep someone in their home because they have to pay property taxes? That's not getting waived, but there's no one to go after. I mean, obviously we went after the contractor, we went after the bond, we went after the PACE administrator. And we did that so much so that major PACE administrators, guess what, filed for bankruptcy. So Renovate America, which is one of the largest PACE administrators, filed for bankruptcy in 2020. They had millions of dollars of lawsuits against them, including several by Public Counsel, class actions. So all of that had to stop. And Renovate America, which was the PACE administrator, of course, is being bought by Benji, which is just another company owned by Renovate America. But Benji doesn't have to worry about paying back or being involved in any of these lawsuits because they're a different organization under bankruptcy code. So we are still fighting to try to get some relief for the homeowners in that chapter in that bankruptcy. But one of the things that we finally were able to do was get the County of Los Angeles to stop the PACE program. So about 3 years ago, the County of Los Angeles was like, you know what, this is a terrible thing. We're not going to do it anymore. So there are no more PACE loans being offered through the County of Los Angeles. We are working with the county, because we have sued the county for these issues, to actually take off the assessment and get the PACE administrators that are not in bankruptcy to agree to release the liens on the property. But this has been going on since 2013. We still have dozens of clients who are at risk if the county calls in that the property tax. And you know, the funny thing is, it's one of the few times that the mortgage companies and the banks are on our side, because they lose money because they're paying those taxes and then they're not getting it back. So that's sort of hopefully kind of another sort of from start to almost finish. We're not quite there yet, but change that has been happening. Oh, we also got a PACE restitution fund that we're trying to get through the state Senate and Assembly this year. So if you're willing to make some phone calls to once we get that up to your representative saying, yes, please, we agree, this PACE restitution fund should move forward so that people can get money back. We were successful in doing that with a solar restitution fund. So there are many individuals who had those solar panels put on their homes that were able to get some money, some relief through that fund. Vita, I see a question from you.
I just quickly want to thank you, Elizabeth. I feel like I've been down the rabbit hole of finance and consumer problems, and I love the work that you're doing, but I found it very depressing. And I was thinking that maybe I'd like to hear Dick Bunce's reflection once again about the work that we have to do. Thank you for your presentation.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. It's been enlightening and daunting all at once. What you guys do is so significant and important and complex. And I take my hat off to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank